You may notice that I'm on my best behaviour tonight, folks. I'm on my best behaviour in part because there is at least one person in this room who I have incredibly profound respect for. A person who is, well, one. A person who is a living legend in my mind, and a person who I feel intimidated having to even introduce. And I'd like to introduce one of my heroes and a legend, Rosalie Kunoth-Monks, folks.
He still is scary. He was uncontrollable. And he continues to hold that spark. And I'm proud to see that he's certainly not intimidated by anything or anyone. I would like to pay homage to traditional owners of this part of the country. I did have the privilege of living here, and probably in those days cutting my political teeth with the Indigenous people of this area. And they are the living legends, not so much me. But I would also like to introduce my granddaughter Ruby, that people have been overlooking. And she's a force to be reckoned with. She decided to accompany Nana down to Melbourne because I was saying I'm not going. So Ruby said, Nan, I'll come with you. Come on, we've got to go. And bravely she jumped on the plane, her first trip. I'm glad to report that she enjoyed it. Yeah. I'd also like to pay tribute to my niece in front of you all. That's Barbara Shaw. She has worked tirelessly and absolutely in the face of absolute destructive resistance from the government side. Les, for the first time I met him in Switzerland. When we went over there, Dr. Giannini and I, and spent quite wonderful times over there in spite of what we were there for. So it was one of those lighter moments, I guess, when you can, after hours, just sit and be human beings and not feel like you do at home here in Australia, that you're out of sync with the mainstream. So that was a good time. Les, I've heard a lot about Jon Altman, and I do thank him for all the things that he's probably more eloquently able to express on our behalf on many forums. I have lived 75, almost 76 now, years of my life feeling that I'm an outsider in my own country. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy when you're clinging to your language, when you're clinging to your identity, and when you're clinging to the essence of your being. And tonight I thought I'd share with you some of the reflections since the intervention. But I don't want to talk to you as you being white people and me being an Aboriginal. I want to talk to you and hopefully reach out to you. The pain in the last 5 years that Aboriginal people have carried. It's not a thing to brandy around. It's not a thing to say, I have survived the intervention during peacetime, not during wartime. I don't want to talk on the intellectual capacity of myself saying to you all the things that I feel is wrong with the government. We are all aware in Australia of the horrific journey that Aboriginal people have had to have. Right from the beginning, people say invasion, but I say from our first encounter, it was kinder when we were shot than being under the care of Macklin. The trauma, emotional, mentally, a lot of us are going through tremendous trauma. And that's not over-exaggerating, because we live in terror of our languages, our ceremonies, and our land being taken off us right at this time in our history. My recollection of the intervention at my home community, Arrernte, which is commonly known as Utopia, was the day that soldiers in uniform, the police, and public servants arrived. And we were ushered up to the basketball stadium, and we were all told that we were now under the intervention. We don't have access to newspapers. A lot of us don't have access to television. A lot of us were going along our normal way, living at home and just doing the ordinary, everyday things. But on that day when they landed, it was incredible. We really thought we were going to be rounded up and taken, because John Howard had made the statement, and Mal Bruff, of course, carried it out, that we were now under intervention. So tonight I thought I'd share with you the greatest impact of the last 5 years of the intervention has been on the mental and emotional health of Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. People have developed a very deep sense of insecurity that undermines their feelings of certainty and safety, because the age-old social structures are being eroded as we sit in this room. People from homelands and the remote areas are being forced to recognise their own vulnerability and their dependency on the system that has been forced upon them, and consequently the lack of control over their futures. People who've been made to starve on a daily basis to get their food absolutely rely on that horrible Centrelink money, which is a pittance anyway. Young people, of course, are our concern. As mothers, grandmothers, all of us, we worry about our children. In the homelands, young people are staying close, in my homeland that is, with their elders. But those who have drifted into the growth towns or who live there are in difficulty. We see that Barbara talks about it quite a bit. She puts a nice picture on it because she can't really bring it out in the raw way that it's happening in Alice Springs in particular, and also in Tennant Creek. So these kids, they drift away from our place, but at the same time, in the last 5 years, those kids are not rocks. They feel the shift of what used to be their stable home, what used to be their stable family. They feel it because we are traumatised. We are traumatised by the government policies that are in place right now. I would imagine that a lot of the people, when they became aware that they were going to be killed in the last war, mainly I guess the Jewish people, when they became aware in their last moments that they were dying, that terror, I can now imagine what they went through, because I'm going through it in the Northern Territory now. So the kids, of course, their response is going to be anger. Of course, they're going to feel that they have lost belief in any fairness within the system. And many of them are resorting to what is commonly known as the antisocial behaviour in Alice Springs. And a lot, unfortunately, are turning against each other. And that, I don't believe it's accidental. I believe that is somehow engineered or so forth by the policies that we do turn on each other and that we do fight each other, especially if you perceive someone to have maybe a little bit more than you have. And in the poorest or the most deprived communities, this does happen. The bribery and corruption that is going on by the government also further separates people, separates them for a little bit of money because they've leased their land. In leasing their land, they've also brought on themselves this feeling of guilt, this feeling of having given up. And they feel that, but because maybe Hermannsburg might get $85,000, I think is one of the things being floated around. Even the land councils play a role in further fragmenting and separating Aboriginal people. Once we are separated and we suffer alone, we are easy prey for Protector Macklin, I think Jeff McMullen used that, to come along and just stomp over us. It is an absolute nightmare. I don't think for one moment any of the speakers prior to myself have exaggerated in any way. It is the lack of awareness of communities around Australia that actually allows what is happening and what is done supposedly for the better of us Aboriginal people. The other thing that I really believe is that we have not got long before we lose the essence and the continuance of our Aboriginal people. We will certainly be smarter. We'll have suits, we'll have little ones growing up without their language. We'll have them all being a carbon copy of the rest so that you are all the same. There will not be the colour. There will not be the glorious songs. There will not be the dances that meant something. It'll only be for entertainment. And how shallow is that? So tonight, in sharing with you my pain, I'm not doing it for your entertainment. I'm doing it with you tonight, hoping that we can unite. And in a free, democratic country, I still have the belief that we can overcome things that are not fair, things that are wrong, things that are absolutely evil. I think it was back when they first came out that momentarily we were stunned and shocked. And then we saw the blue signs. Blue signs, not just anywhere, but leading into our sacred, thousands of years old estates. We had never ever ceased being a sovereign people in Australia. Never. And we're not about to do it now, either for Macklin or for the red-head, what is she, Prime Minister. She has no maternal instincts, she has nothing. But I don't want to make this a personal attack on anyone. But to think, those two ladies, somebody said, I think it was Gary, not to have feeling on what they're inflicting on a group of people, section of the Australian community. I can't come to terms with it. So I think it was back then when we had the blue signs come on and we had to tell our kids, those kids were 20-year-old or more, what is pedophile? We had to explain in detail what pedophile was. What is pornography? We had to explain what pornography is. You don't see Aboriginal people in any of the pornographic things. I've never seen any. Posing for papers or being filmed. That's all from the other side of our community, not from my race of people. They don't pose or simulate sex or anything on videos or indeed in glossy magazines. You won't find them there. If you do, let me know. But we were accused of it. And just for your information, I worked very closely with Nanette Rogers. I was one of the best interpreters, high-class interpreters, at the Alice Springs Court. I went out with her on many of those cases. Most of those cases that we did were, not that it excuses it, were under the horrors of either petrol sniffing, alcohol, or other substance abuse. They were no longer normal people. But that is not an excuse for the government to say overall that we're all like that, because we certainly aren't. People were doing those kind of things, and they weren't pedophile rings or anything. They did that. Some opportunity arose when they were in this state of oblivion. So I think it was back in 2009 when John Lawler, head of the Australian Crime Commission, announced that there were and had never been any pedophile rings in the Northern Territory. It's not in the Aboriginal arena at all. We do hear on the news that even police have pornographic things whilst they're on duty in the police through these, what do you call the computers. So over the past 10 years, as I've alluded to, social structure of society has been eroded by increasing materialistic approaches to the way we live our lives. The Northern Territory has not escaped these changes. I think we were in the brunt of it all. Aboriginal society today appears to fall into three categories, and mostly government has difficulty recognising the differences. Firstly, there are people living their traditional lives in communities. I am one of those people. So is this little girl sitting next to me. She is bilingual. She talks Aboriginal language, much to my joy. She goes to an Aboriginal school, and she is also very eloquent and composed in this society. She is a tribal Aboriginal woman. She has her body paints on, she has danced, and she sings her ancestor songs. A very gifted young woman. Secondly, there are those who live in more developed centres, living in nuclear families, deeply respectable of their roots and maintaining custom. Customs looking back thousands of years. Thirdly, there are the high flyers, and I think names have been mentioned here tonight, especially up there in Queensland somewhere. Many of those have disregarded their heritage in their own lives, but have been able to capitalise on their Aboriginality to their own advantage. This is human nature, and we must learn to forgive. They do us a disservice all the same when they speak for us. We don't want them speaking for us. We'll speak. If not in this language, in our own language. We must speak truly for ourselves, because the leaders of Black Australia, as Janini Gondara says over and over, are the born leaders from their own group of people. Like I'm a Anmatyerr Elder, Arrernte, so I got all that and a little bit of Kaytetye too. So I'm a real Bitzer, but I must be endorsed, and I have been endorsed by the Alyawarr Nation to be a speaker. The intervention, of course, as I said before, is based on materialistic approaches to negotiation. Doesn't work. Houses, big ones, or I'd love to have a Lamborghini or something like that, really expensive car. That's not our priority. It's the quality of life that is our priority. And I'm not saying this because I'm as old as Methuselah. We're saying this, the quality of our life is so important, otherwise it's not worth living. Put a bullet between our eyes, as a lot of the old people are saying now. And the young people joining us too. I think you've had enough public speakers before. So, consultations and agreement with the individual community leaders and the people should not be by bribery of saying we'll build you so many houses, we'll give you so much of taxpayers' money for this or that. That's not what life's about. And you know what? A lot of the old folks say, well, tell them to take the nails and the whatever else that takes to build a house and take it back to their country. We can live without those if we're going to be punished for being who we are. So we would advise or respectively ask Mrs. Macklin and her myriad of public servants to really look at what it is and listen to what it is we're saying. Our greatest fear, in closing, I would like to say, our greatest fear in the first tier of the people that I've mentioned is that we are losing, and fast, our fragile cultural background and identity. And we feel in many ways we are being used and usurped by people who do not value our language or our ceremonies, and indeed our land. The solution, my dear friends who've taken time out to come here today, is not through the government policies. The solution is to stand strong together. You have two beautiful cultures here. One is English, where we all speak and get together on. The other one is your Aboriginal culture within Australia. We are your people and you are our people. Apmarindana Australian Mladnama Mariana Nukandrakingarandi Nongwenanda Mariana Nachianatanal Tamandalachianak Marian. It's not on the basis of your colour that I would push you away. It is on the basis of a racist attitude, and that is wrong, and it devalues every one of us. It devalues me and it devalues you. Let's just say no to this intervention, and let's say no to our government of the day. Unfortunately, both of the governments feel that we all need to be normalised. We refuse that. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Rosie. We are very privileged to have had our three sisters here from the Northern Territory.